Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of the Word of the Day podcast. My name is Jamie Silva, I am your host, and now that I've begun recording, I see no way to avoid pleasantly explaining another useful word to you all. Today's word is the verb extricate. I would say that this word means to escape or get out of something, and that something could either be a physical constraint of some kind or a social situation or obligation. So for the first sense of extricate, the getting out of something physically sense, the action I always think of here is wriggling. Think of like the motions of a cat who's being forced to wear a Christmas sweater and is twisting every which way and backing up and trying to make itself small and contorting itself into various shapes and generally doing its level best to get out of, to extricate itself from, this redundant and unwelcome article of clothing. Similarly, people must occasionally extricate themselves from things like big fluffy blankets, extension cords, or hoses that get all wrapped up around your feet, wetsuits, sweaters that are a couple sizes too small, etc. If you've been in these situations / articles of clothing, then you probably know the sorts of awkward gyrations and wrigglings that are often necessary to extricate yourself from whatever is restricting you. A great image here to help you get the idea is that of a butterfly slowly, painstakingly emerging from / extricating itself from its cocoon. If you've never watched a video of this process, look one up. They're really cool. Now on to the second sense of extricate, which is the escape from a social situation or obligation one. This is basically the same idea as the physical escape, but sort of metaphorical. Like, if you're at a party and you want to go home, but people are talking to you, you can't just turn on your heel and walk out the door without explanation. It would be rude, right? People would notice, and maybe not invite you back. Here, in a sense, then, you're trapped, and you're looking for a way to escape, a way to extricate yourself from that gathering. Most likely, you'd do so by thinking up an excuse, something that is just now calling you away. Thanks so much, this was so fun, let's do it again sometime. Okay, gotta go, bye. Another classic situation, or just thing, that people routinely extricate themselves from is relationships. Here's why it makes sense. If you're in a relationship with someone and you do not want to be, you may feel stuck, right? Like you want to end it, but you're not sure how. And maybe you don't want to be too harsh because you don't want the other person to be depressed. And definitely you can't break up with them right now. It's right before Christmas. And also, we're supposed to attend a wedding together after New Year's, and we'll still both be invited to it either way, so that'll be uncomfortable. But we can't just not go. What would people say? But what do they say if we do go after we split, or only one of us does? And it's so complicated. Well, this complication and the difficulty of smoothly and undramatically breaking up with someone speaks to how common it is to sort of have to wriggle out of a relationship, to have to extricate yourself from it. And the extrication process doesn't necessarily end when you've given the "it's not you, it's me" speech. Unless that is, you do the clean break, lose my number, stop following me on Instagram, don't talk to my friends either, that type of thing. But not a lot of people do it this way, I don't think. Instead, the standard polite approach is to try to let the jilted party down easy and say, "No hard feelings, I hope we can still be friends." These are, of course, reasonable and worthy sentiments, and oftentimes it does work out this way. But unfortunately, by not closing off contact entirely, you run the risk of things like follow-up demands for a more satisfactory explanation for why you can't be together, pleas to reconsider, and the possibility of some awkward interactions in social settings, where you're trying to be nice to the other person, but not like too nice, because that might give them the wrong idea, and so on. You may experience all of this and more before you're able, if you're able, to go back to being just friends again, as intended. This additional messiness is also part of extricating yourself from a relationship, if you decide to do it this nice way. And it's not simple, it's not easy, which is logical, because extricating yourself from stuff seldom is, unless you happen to be really good at it, in which case, good for you. Another usage note is that it's possible to extricate yourself from things before they've begun, as long as you've somehow promised, committed, or hinted that you would do them, or would show up, or what have you. Like if someone asks you to join them for a few games of horseshoes this Saturday, if you just say, "Nope, sorry, I've got a thing," that's not extricating yourself because you never agreed to come in the first place. But as soon as you so much as say, "Oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. I'll see if I can make it," well, if you want to back out now, you're going to have to extricate yourself. Now, the reason I called the social sense of extricate the metaphorical sense is that I feel like you can use all the same descriptors and imagery as you did for the physical sense, that of being stuck or trapped and wriggling free, even though, in the social sense, there's nothing literally physically constraining you. Just like the phrase get out of can either refer to physical spaces, i.e., she got out of the car, or obligations, i.e., she got out of cleanup duty thanks to her sprained ankle. Extricate also works in both contexts. Now, much later than usual, let's take a look at the Google definition of extricate. This goes, quote, to free someone or something from a constraint or difficulty, unquote. This is pretty good, I think, since constraint or difficulty is broad enough to cover both of the senses we've been discussing. One clarification, though. This definition says to free someone or something. But in my experience, this word is primarily used to describe people extricating themselves from things, not other people or things. Like, even if you were helping someone remove, say, a necklace that got stuck in their hair, you'd probably phrase that as you helped them extricate themselves from the necklace. Extricating things or other people from stuff isn't unheard of, like you might extricate a screwdriver from the way back of a toolbox, or you might extricate an unruly toddler from beneath the dining room table. But that's not as common, I don't think. Up next is a quick look at the etymology. Extricate comes from the Latin word extricatus, which combines ex, meaning out of, and the noun tricae, meaning hindrances or perplexities. Merriam-Webster adds this explanation, quote, while a number of words, such as disentangle, share with extricate the meaning of to free from difficulty, extricate suggests the act of doing so with care and ingenuity. As in, through months of careful budgeting, he was able to extricate himself from his financial burdens, unquote. This makes a lot of sense to me, because extricating is typically more of a process, and probably one you have to put at least some care, effort, and thought into. For example, you wouldn't extricate yourself from a pair of slippers, because they just slip right on and off. Nor would you have to extricate yourself from stopping for gas on the way home from work. You could just not do it. It's totally up to you. So there's nothing to get out of, exactly. Conversely, extricating yourself from a thicket of blackberry vines, or extricating yourself from a commitment you made to be captain of your local Quidditch team, that probably takes some care and attention. So extricate is the perfect word. In my view, while both senses of extricate are useful, the social/metaphorical sense is especially so, because people try to get out of things all the time, since it's a lot easier to agree to do things, especially if you're technically free at the time they're happening, than it is to follow through and actually do them later. You know, stuff happens, life gets busy, or you're just not really feeling up for it by the time it's going on, whatever. But just like with the party situation we talked about earlier, simply not showing up after being invited, or backing out of an obligation without any explanation whatsoever, would be terribly rude. So instead, you have to extricate yourself. You have to back out diplomatically, citing some legitimate, or at least legitimate-sounding excuse. Though, I will say, with extricate, I think the implication is more on the seemingly legitimate side. Like, there may be some unstated reasons also, and those reasons are perhaps a bit more selfish than the ones you say out loud, and they may boil down to just, I don't wanna. Speaking of which, I'd now like to turn to one of our ever-popular segments, Not in Stock, in which we proudly present a revolutionary new product or service that unfortunately isn't available right now in the fabulous Word of the Day online store, which you can always visit at wottdpodcast.com/merchandise. So, as we discussed, extricating yourself from things isn't usually easy or fun. In the physical sense, it's probably uncomfortable and difficult, and in the social sense, it can be awkward, and there's a risk of hurt feelings, even if your reason for flaking or backing out is perfectly valid. Therefore, in order to help you avoid acquiring obligations that you later have to extricate yourself from, I would like to introduce you to our exciting new app called Aw Man, Can't Make It This Time, which accesses and automatically edits the digital calendars on your phone, thus keeping you free from engagements on the nights or days that you just want to chill at home or do something else. Here's how the app works. If you're talking to someone in person, and they ask if you can go somewhere or do something, whatever, You can say, "Oh, that sounds great. When did you say it was? Thursday night? Yeah, let me see if I'm free then." Then you whip out your phone and pretend to check your calendar. But instead, you secretly open up the "Aw man, can't make it this time" app, which incidentally will have been listening to your conversation this whole time and is trained to detect verbal invitations to things. Then, with just a quick tap on the "Get me out of this" button, the app will instantly place a realistic-looking event on your calendar for the day or night in question. At that point, you can say, "Oh, did you say Thursday? I forgot. Looks like I can't make it this time, I guess." And then show your friend your calendar on your phone, which will now display an event on that Thursday. Another great thing about this app is that it's highly customizable. For example, when you're setting up your profile, you can choose from our ample selection of pretext events, organized by length, location, and specificity. The app will then draw on that pool of potential engagements when putting stuff on your calendar. This is important because you might not want to show your friends a bowling night with the Jenkins appointment, lest they ask, "Really? You bowl? I thought you had a bum knee." Or perhaps, "Who are the Jenkins?" You can also have the "Aw man, can't make it this time" app autofill an appointment or event based on your personal information and likely demographic preferences. So if you were married with children, it would not select "Out clubbin' with my besties." And by the same token, if you were a college-age male, it wouldn't pick out "Weekly bingo night with Great Aunt Mildred." Though, if you are married with children, I will say you probably do not need this app. You can just be like, "Oh, that sounds fun, but I don't know if we can get a babysitter that night." Good babysitters, they're so hard to find and so expensive. And that's it. You're good. But anyway, there's one more feature of this product that is really cool. When faced with a surprise in-person invitation that they wish to politely decline, some people like to say, "Oh, I wish I could, but I have a thing, sorry." Which, of course, is kind of vague and unpersuasive. Well, the "Aw man, can't make it this time" app has a setting just for this. If your friend says skeptically, "Oh, really? You have a thing?" You can say, "That's right, I do have a thing." And then show them your phone, where the app will have blocked out the appropriate time on your calendar with an appointment that just says "a thing." This may not be more specific, but maybe you want it that way, and at least it indicates that you did indeed already have something planned. You see, we've thought of everything. Now, unfortunately, the "Aw man, can't make it this time" app isn't available for download yet in the Word of the Day online store, or any app store for that matter, because key members of our coding team who are building the app keep being called away on urgent business, or going to family reunions, or having long dental appointments. Or at least, that's the sort of thing that they show me on their calendars whenever I ask them if they can get together this week for a coding session. Okay, with that addition of not in stock out of the way, it's time to turn to a couple examples of how to use Extricate in ordinary conversation or writing. Example number 1. Although Tammy had reluctantly signed up to coordinate the school bake sale, she was able to extricate herself by arguing that it would be extremely educational for the students to coordinate it themselves. Example number 2. It's not that Quentin minded putting on the mascot outfit and cheering on his high school football team, the Springfield Fighting Centipedes, but extricating himself from its thick layers of polyester and plastic after each game was always a serious hassle. Example number 3 comes from the book The Lone Star Ranger by Zane Grey, and this, as you'll hear, is the physical sense of extricate. Quote, "Dwayne went into the water almost up to his knees and felt the quicksand grip his feet. Then, leaning forward till he reached the plank, he pulled it toward him and lay on it. Very carefully then, Dwayne began to extricate his right foot from the sucking sand. It seemed as if his foot was encased in solid rock. But then there was a movement upward, and he pulled with all the power he dared use. His foot came out slowly, and at length was free." Unquote. Whew, that's a close shave there for Dwayne. It's a great example, too, because there's perhaps nothing more difficult and essential to extricate yourself from physically than quicksand. And finally, example number 4 comes from the book War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Quote, "Boris, having apparently relieved himself of an onerous, meaning burdensome or inconvenient, duty, and extricated himself from an awkward situation by placing someone else in it, became quite pleasant again." Unquote. All right, looks like that'll do it for us, and that'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and special thanks today to producer Pete for crawling between my desk and the wall here in the studio to retrieve an important sticky note that I'd accidentally dropped down there. He did get stuck for a few minutes, but with a little help from the Word of the Day janitorial staff and a crowbar, he managed to extricate himself and grab the sticky note. which says, let's see here, don't forget to encourage the listeners to spread the word about the show. Oh, right, of course. Listeners, I hereby encourage you to spread the word about the show. Excellent. That was definitely worth it. Pete, you do not get all squished and dusty for nothing. Okay, folks, this is your host, Jamie Silva, saying so long from the RAV4 Studios. We will see you next time, and until then, as always, have a great